Whenever people suggest that Judaism could be separate from politics, I think about Leviticus chapter 25, Parashat Bahar, the Shabbaton and the Yovel, the sabbatical and Jubilee. These mitzvot are not just personal and spiritual teachings about what you eat and what you share. They are about the whole system of property and ownership and power, and about our relationship to the land and the ecosystem that provides our food. Every 7 years, it doesn't matter who owns a field and who has stored up food from the year before. Everyone has access to all of it, and everyone comes side by side to get food from the land and from private storehouses, and maybe they even eat together. Every 50 years, it doesn't matter who has bought or sold a piece of land and who lives where. All families go back to the land holdings originally given to their family in the time of Yehoshua, when the people first came into the promised land. Wealthy families give back what they have bought legitimately. Poor families are restored to what they needed to sell. None of this happens individually or one at a time. Both the Shabbaton and the Yovel happen to everyone at the same time in every region of the land. It is a social experience around property and wealth and power that is shared all at once by society as a whole. It occurred to me that Shabbaton and Yovel are far more radical than even the Exodus itself, the overturning of Pharaoh, which I have taught often was unlike anything ancient people had ever thought previously about the value of human beings and about power. The Exodus was unprecedented, but it was in response to a situation of actual group suffering imposed by a specific oppressor. Shabbaton and Yovel are not in response to any specific instance like that. They are pre-programmed responses to the regular things that happen in a society where people work the land and trade food and labor and exchange property. They are for a society that also has good ideas of tzedakah and chesed, giving money and acts of caring, which individuals are responsible to carry out and which are supposed to be organized by the community as well. Without the need for painful suffering on a massive scale or mobilizing against a tyrant, the Torah in Leviticus 25 mandates the overturning of our relations in the economy and society, making it all change visibly in the open every 7 years and every 50 years. Maybe the end of the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, is the real bookend to the beginning of Exodus. Exodus begins with our ancestors as slaves building cities for Pharaoh's regime, and it ends with them building the opposite, the Mishkan, a spiritual center for the regime of the divine. Let them make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them, says Exodus. But now, nearly at the end of Leviticus, people imagine building a system for recalibrating their society on the go, making sure no one can accumulate Pharaoh-like wealth and power over the others. For to me the children of Israel are servants, says the end of Leviticus. And the Talmudic rabbis explain, servants to me and not servants to other servants, not slaves to each other. Shabbaton and Yovel are the social and political inoculation against more pharaohs, even a pharaoh among the Israelites themselves. Political, this is. And yet it's not. I've been using the word politics a bit fast and loose, because this part of the Torah does not show us politics in action, only an outcome it hopes the Israelites will implement. We know the sabbatical year was implemented in ancient times, and still is today in some form in the land of Israel. And in Roman times and modern times, there has been political process around the sabbatical. We have no idea whether the Jubilee really ever happened exactly the way the Torah stipulates. Leviticus 25 describes an ideal society, and we can think about the moral and spiritual principles the Torah teaches, but an actual outcome like these could only be ensured by political activity. Saying the Torah has social visions doesn't itself prove that there is a Torah of politics and political action. I love to bask in the Shabbaton and Yovel. Any excuse to do that is dayenu. But I want to say more about the Torah of political action, which in a way only begins with things in this chapter. I want to jump off from a distinction proposed by Yehuda Kurtzer, co-president of the Shalom Hartman Institute. For the past few years, Yehuda has been teaching around the idea that American Jews in particular ought to distinguish in our civic activity between the moral the political, and the partisan. Briefly, Yehuda describes the moral as our core social principles, the political as our collaborative strategy and work in society, and the partisan as the activity we do typically within either of the two big teams, the Democrats and the Republicans. Yehuda argues that it is bad for America, and particularly bad for Jews, when we don't distinguish the right way between the moral, the political, and the partisan. The moral refers to the principles and values we hold, which generate our ideas about the good society, and to the actions we actually perform toward other people and in groups of people we know. The moral is also about working on ourselves as people in society. It includes being honest about our own individual gifts and our own individual limits. It's about asking ourselves why we care about this more than that, looking at our own inconsistencies and hypocrisies. The moral is where we make judgments, often about others, though it should also be toward ourselves. The moral is about how we do tshuva around our action and inaction in society, how we hold ourselves individually accountable and recalibrate ourselves, as well as the smaller groups within which we talk about public matters or within which we organize. The moral dimension is very spiritual and obviously very Jewish. The political is a term I want to use in the Aristotelian sense, not yich politics, but the elevating work of defining and creating the polis, the best society that is aligned with our moral values and also cultivates those values among all of us at the same time. We are only real in society, and political activity enlarges us and elevates us and completes us. The political brings people together in purposeful work, helps us each discover our gifts and how they fit together, and shows us new things to admire about each other. The political magnifies our power to achieve visions on a scale not possible just by small group projects or even by giving tzedakah. The political is how we find the power to bring a society into alignment with the ideals of Shabbaton and Yovel. The political is also the level where groups ought to try to understand themselves and look at their own strengths and weaknesses and hypocrisies. Groups need to do tshuva just as much as individuals. This is spiritual work and Jewish work, and indeed the Torah presents the Jewish people as trying to learn how to become a collective that is able to implement the detailed social covenant from Mount Sinai, to internalize it and build a society based on it in the Promised Land. Finally, the partisan is working for the party and candidates we believe right now can bring our moral and political visions into being. It's mobilizing behind the specific leaders and groups we believe can do that. When we use the word politics today, Yehuda Kurtzer points out, what we usually mean is the partisan, picking sides, zero-sum, experiencing outrage and supporting one group and being angry at the other. The moral, the political, and the partisan. Yehuda argues that we have too often collapsed the distinction between the moral and the political and the partisan, and in particular between the political and the partisan. If all we let ourselves look at is the partisan, that becomes our good and evil and our daily religion. We will lose parts of our moral compass to the extent that most of what we can think about or desire is that our group or favored leader wins. We need the moral as something separate, and we need the political as distinct from the partisan as well. People who object to having politics in Judaism say, stick to the moral. But the moral alone is too general. Saying Tselem Elohim, the image of God, does not tell us why we should care about Americans in this way and Ukraine in the same way or perhaps a different way. Talking about Shabbaton and Yovel does not tell us what the tax rates should be on income or wealth. Moral principles frame the questions and suggest directions, but don't give us answers. From the moral, we need those directions. And we need to circle back to the moral principles when we are doing political thinking and political work. We also need all the processes of tshuva, assessing ourselves and what we are bringing to political action, checking our hypocrisy and self-righteousness, making sure we are rooted more in love for those we are responsible for or allies for, and less rooted just in hate of those we are against as partisans. Too much of religious politics is the partisan alone, and that is bad for religion generally and terrible for Jews and Judaism. The partisan is where work is done and things are accomplished, but it is a realm of constant fighting. It cultivates hate and anger and fear. It discourages nuance and punishes ambiguity, and it asks us to hold up as absolutely true things that are only partially true. When we equate all politics with the partisan, the losses that come inevitably in the partisan make all political work angry and fearful and dispiriting and draining. And some of that happens even when we have won something for the time being. Yehuda Kurtzer says we rent out our moral sense too often to the partisan. And since the partisan is win-lose, our moral judgments become binary as well. Our fellow citizens are good or evil, and so too our fellow Jews. Yehuda quotes a Pew study that says as much bias as there is explicit and implicit against people of other backgrounds, whether religious or ethnic or racial or educational or economic, the most widespread hate in America is toward people of different partisan affiliation. The moral is crucial. The partisan is where the rubber meets the road. But neither the moral that supplies our core principles, nor the partisan where we accomplish our goals or we lose, should be the center. At the center should be the political. At the center should be the political for each of us spiritually, and for us as a Jewish community, learning and acting and reflecting. The political is where we ask how our principles translate, where we ask it again and again with other people, even while we are strategizing and even as we are executing our strategies. We ask whether we are being true to our principles or just think we are. The political is where we take time from the practical battles to appreciate and admire others, the leaders who motivate us, the teachers and writers who educate us, the people who bring the signs and the food and crunch the numbers. It's where we see ourselves in a good light as part of such an organism. The political is where we try to understand those we are working against, for the principles they might have, for the people they are loving and standing up for. These are aspects of our opponents we might learn from, or at least learn to answer, if only to make our own moral arguments stronger. The political isn't something you do by yourself. It's not sermons, and it's not Facebook posts, and it's not videos, unless they invite conversation. The political is together, and sometimes it even can be done together by partisans opposing each other. It's what a lot of the civic groups you in my community are involved in are doing in your own political work in the local community. It's not enough for the synagogue to do the moral, and we should not be focused on the partisan. It's not good for religion to stay in a corner or to make itself indistinguishable from a political party. But the political, yes, sometimes acting all together as a Jewish community, and sometimes when we lift up one issue, and sometimes when we're in a learning posture about ourselves as people engaged in the political. That is very much what a religious group should do, and what we Jews should be doing together. And in that sense, maybe Shabbaton and Yovel are political. Apart from the practical sharing and resetting around food and property, year 70 and year 50 are ways to get people talking about the world of years 1 to 6 and years 1 to 49, and maybe even working on that politically, or so I fantasize. Our own times right now are intensely partisan. Let's do our part to elevate this time by making it more political as well.